Miriam, can you please introduce yourself a little bit to me?
Sure. Okay, so my name is Miriam Schwab. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I've been living in Jerusalem, Israel for the last 22 years, more or less. I got into the world of WordPress about 12, 13 years ago. I started working as a freelancer after I had my fourth kid, actually. I was like, I need more flexibility. And I fell into the world of WordPress, fell in love with it. And then I actually started to offer it as a service. So for 12 years, I ran a web development agency. And more recently, I founded a startup also related to the world of WordPress called Stratic. So that's the deal.
Yeah. And in your talk at the WordCamp Europe, you have talked about cross-site scripting. And can you please explain what the so-called XSS is and why should website owners care about that?
So cross-site scripting is the most common type of vulnerability and hack that happens to these types of websites. And it involves getting into the site's database. It's the hardest to detect and the hardest to prevent. And what it does is it gives people access, or hackers access to the website in ways that site owners definitely don't want. Last year at WordCamp Europe in Paris, I gave a talk about like different levels of security that site owners can implement to protect their site. What's good about the world of WordPress is that if you generally keep on top of your plugin updates and your core updates, and there's a few other things you can implement as well, which I spoke about in that talk, you're generally pretty good. But if someone gets in and there is a cross-site scripting attack that takes place, it's much harder. Sometimes site owners don't even know that it's happened. Sometimes it goes into effect if someone else visits it, or if someone visits it from Google. There's all sorts of sneaky ways to implement it, and cleaning it up is also a challenge. So we want to try to make sure that it doesn't happen.
And how can you test your website or your web application if it's vulnerable to cross-site scripting? And what can you do to prevent your WordPress site from XSS?
So in order to see if your site is vulnerable, it's really challenging because it could be anywhere, actually. It could be, in the case of WordPress, it could be on the theme level or a plugin or the core. If you have plugins installed that are well maintained, then generally if something like that is discovered, then there will be a patch. But the problem is that window between when the vulnerability is discovered and when the patch and the update is released for people to implement. Generally, it's a good idea to try to keep your database as well protected from the internet as possible. So some ways to do that are to, let's say, protect your login page. That's generally where people get in, but people can get in from other ways as well. Yeah, but the database is the weak point, and the goal is to try to keep that as protected and out of the hands of anyone else, or away from the access of anyone else as possible. That's all I can say. Like, it's just, there's tools out there that you can use to scan your site to try to detect vulnerabilities. A lot of them don't find everything. We've seen that a site will have been attacked, have been breached, and the tools can't tell, but we can tell. That's the problem with automation, I think. You can't always pick up on things. Most people figure it out when something weird starts to happen or show up on the site. But what I spoke about at WordCamp Europe was the content security policies, which is like another level of protection that people can.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually also my next question. Can you please explain what content security policies are and how do they work?
So content security policies are a header that you send from your website to the browser. It's like a message from the website to the browser, and it tells the browser how to behave in certain instances. There's like a number of different types of security headers that exist, and one of them is the content security policy. And the content security policy is a whitelist. So what that means is it says to the browser, this is the content that you can load and is okay. It's like, it's safe. Anything else that tries to load on the page, do not load. So how does that connect to the cross-site scripting? So cross-site scripting will inject something malicious And then when the page loads in the browser will load the malicious script or whatever, because it can't tell the difference between what is malicious and what is not. If the browser is told load all of this stuff, it will load all of it. But when a site has the content security policy in place, it basically says to the browser, if there's something that's not in this list of types of content that is trying to load, block it. And then what it does is, if the site has been breached in some way, it won't impact the user, the site visitor. They will stay safe. The site owner can try to fix it and whatever, but in the meantime, there's no threat to the site visitor themselves.
What do you think? Why should especially WordPress developers care about content security policies?
Well, unfortunately, despite the fact that there's constant work being done on the security side of things with WordPress, it's still the most attacked platform, mainly because of its size. It's a great ROI for hackers, because if you find a vulnerability in one site, then chances are that it exists in thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even potentially millions of other sites, right? And it's impossible to stay on top of everything all the time. So like that window that I mentioned before between vulnerability being exposed and being patched, that's like a great opportunity for a hacker, and things can still happen. So I think we all have to live with the reality that despite what we do to protect our site, there's always a chance that it will be breached. And so the security of our users, our site visitors, is the most important thing. We want to make sure that they're not being negatively impacted by our site. So when a WordPress developer implements a content security policy for their site, it means that in the chance that something happens to their site, it won't impact their users. And also, I would say that that positively impacts the site owner's bottom line from a business point of view, because their site continues to be safe, visitors will return. Whereas if they visit the site and it's clearly been messed with, then they will hesitate the next time.
And what kind of WordPress sites are CSPs suitable for?
So really any site, because CSPs are suitable for any type of site. They're tricky to implement because you can easily block your own content. There's different types. The content security policy works on the levels of like the type of content. So you could say like images can only load from this particular domain, right? But sometimes, for example, I'll give an example with our own site on Stratic. We have a content security policy in place, obviously, and my talk from WordCamp Europe, we want to embed in our site, but we hadn't whitelisted WordPress.tv yet. So it was not displaying, and we had to update our content security policy to support that. So it's kind of like a cat and mouse of always being on top of the types of content that you actually want to load and not block yourself. But I think it's a good practice to have in place, and it's probably the way that every site should be. So yeah, I mean, that's the world of web development, right? There's always like something else to do. There's always a little bit more work. That's just the nature of the game, and it keeps your users secure. So you should do it.